What up? It's the weekend review show. We're talking week 9 review. It's John, Tyler, and Kevin bringing you guys the heat from week 9. We're going to talk about everything. We're going to get some screenshots up from lineups. Just a reminder, guys, we still need desktop screenshots. So still getting some screenshots from the phone. Just as a reminder, desktop screenshots, the ones that we're going to show in the video when Simon puts them up, use those as an example. They need to look like that. So that's a desktop screenshot when we review the lineups we're going to get to. But before we talk week 9 and talk lineups, I got to bring in my co-host, Tyler. How was your week 9, man?
Oh, terrible. I said at the start of the show yesterday, I said if week 8 was great, which it certainly was for me, I said week 9 is mine, and it was anything but fine. It was terrible, actually. Overall, the results were horrible. I didn't want to play Lamar. I know why everyone liked him, but there was just so many other options that I liked, and I can't believe the run out. No excuses, but the run out of like you had to have everything go right, even overtime for the Marquise Brown to work with it. And then on top of it, you had to have no other quarterback show up. But mind you, in the end, Justin Herbert did show up. I just didn't have the right combinations of that setup and had way too much Eckler versus Keenan Allen and the other guys like Cook and whatever you could have put with them. So I got some stuff right. We'll talk about that. Finally, had a week where running backs went well. You'll probably want to back out because your Moss concussion over there, but Gaskin still took care of him real early and kept it going. But Booker, Chubb, loved all those guys. They all made sense to me. I still don't know what the hell the Cowboys and Dak were doing. I can just continuously see over and over him overthrowing CD Lamb on these wide open shots and just walking through them. But overall, not the best week for me, Johnny.
God, I can picture one of those passes he had CD Lamb on, and I'm just like, oh God, please do something. Just move the ball, like get it near. And Dak, he struggled, man. He definitely struggled. It hurt Zeke too in a way because I mean, just they couldn't get anything moving. I mean,
don't know
Zeke
what they were doing. Like them and the Bills. Don't let me. I said it on Twitter. I don't give a fuck about Josh Allen doing anything to Josh Allen or dreaming about Josh Allen. I don't care. I was already so tilted that it was 9-6 for Jacksonville. Like what was going on there? And the Jags could do absolutely nothing. It's just unbelievable. Some of the spots yesterday that I thought were incredible where the guys just did absolutely nothing.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up the Gaskins thing. So we talked, we had a bet, Zach Moss, K Falik. It was Zach Moss against Myles Gaskins. Now, obviously, we know what happened. Myles Gaskins scored the early touchdown. Zach Moss goes out a little later in the game and is done for the rest of the game. Gaskins gets the win. I thought Gaskins was the worst chalk play in all of chalk play. People were just playing him because of the matchup, and I thought it was awful. He got 6 receptions, which was good. I think he totaled 28 yards with the 6 receptions, and he ran 18 times, averaging 1.8 yards per carry, and got like, I don't even know what it was, like 40 yards or whatever it was, 38 yards. Yeah. But like, it was just, he ran so good with the catches. I'm fine with fading those plays. I'll fade the Myles Gaskins play. And if he gets 16, I'm actually okay with that. Like, I'm fine fading that type of chalk and saying, like, if he gets in the box, he's probably going to do fine. And on this slate, he was fine. Like, if you played Myles Gaskins on this slate, you weren't pissed because besides Chubb, you weren't kicking yourself because you played Myles Gaskins over Devontae Booker. You weren't kicking yourself if you played Myles Gaskins over Josh Jacobs, over anyone else in that range, even the upper range, Zeke, like he did fine. Like he outdid those top dogs. So in the end, the play wins out, but I still think the process of if you just don't like a guy and you don't think a guy's good, you don't have to play him just because of a matchup. And that's one thing that I always do. And I'll never fold to like, oh, just because this guy is a great matchup, I have to play him. I have to think the guy is a good football player. I have to think there are other things going right for that guy for him to be in play for me. And I thought Miami's offense sucks. Their offensive line sucks. Now they lose their quarterback, who I already thought sucked, to get a worse quarterback. This is going really, really bad for Miami. And the one thing I'll say I got wrong was I fully went away from that game outside of Mike Gaskin, not Myles Gaskins, Mike Gesicki. I still had Mike Gesicki in my core, and that was wrong. I should have took him out because the rest of that game I was fading once Jacoby Brissett was the quarterback, and I should have just friggin' went the whole way, and I didn't. That was something I got wrong, and I should have fixed, even though, again, Gesicki didn't kill you. So how was your week?
Johnny Fiance, it's good to see you. Tyler, it's always nice seeing you, and I love the new setup, and I'm looking forward to the Tour de Tambo house soon, maybe. We got to get
coming.
cribs.
We're getting there, K-Fal. Like, we're moving along. And yesterday, people asked on YouTube on Off the Chalk if I got robbed. I said, no, I just wanted to at least start with something. And now it's still not where it needs to be. I just try to add a little bit of flair each day for the buildup.
I can't wait. Anyways, JSU just went on what time is it? 10:45, 11:45 now. I guess we're almost 10 minutes into the show. He went on his first 5-minute rant about the game that he liked the least. And guess what? That was the game I liked the most. So really, really worked out because honestly, real quick thoughts on that game is the offenses had no issues moving it. The only thing that happened that stopped it from occurring were 9 sacks and 9 turnovers. So it was an absolute disaster when you think about it. But the offenses had no problem moving the ball, except for the fact that they enjoyed throwing the ball to the other team or fumbling it often, or they couldn't. The offensive lines struggled 1 or 2 plays each drive, it felt like, and got sacked. And otherwise, they were hitting their wide receivers without an issue and stuff like that. They just couldn't finish. And it was stupid. Listen, the Texans running backs have a 25% efficiency right now in regards to doing it over expected or something like that. I saw from a Houston beat writer today. Their efficiency is just dog shit. And then they have a coach that shouldn't be a coach. He 2-yard line at 17-6, and he decided to kick a field goal instead of going for it in that situation when the team can't run an offense otherwise, and he kicks a damn field goal instead of going for it on that 4th down. And I just started laughing. I couldn't take it anymore. It was just watching that game was an embarrassment. I'm going to the Texans game against the Titans in 2 weeks, and usually I'm decked out in my Texans gear and stuff. And I don't know if I can because I really want the Titans to win, number one, so we get a top draft pick. But this team's an absolute embarrassment. It was embarrassing watching that game. There's now talk of whether Tyrod should be the starting quarterback next week. So we now are dealing with a stupid situation there, and it was a mess. And so in the end, my week did not go well, unfortunately, with how heavy I was on that game. But you live and you learn and move on to tonight's really bad game as well. And overall, this week was nuts. If you look at what did you expect the outcomes to be, I think you can look at 5 of 12 games being actual the expected result being there. And that's really weird to see in an NFL where it's very top heavy for the most part usually.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I mean, I would have got a bunch of games wrong. I know that. One thing I will say. So were you okay, K-Fal? So I knew that you were somewhat on that game. Were you on the Tyrod side of that game? Were you on the Brissett side? Were you on both? Because I don't know about you. I didn't understand it. And maybe, Tambo, you got these questions too, but Sunday morning, I got flooded with Tyrod Taylor questions. Flooded in the DMs, a little in the Discord. I got text messages from people I knew asking me about Tyrod Taylor. And I'm going wait a second. I thought this game was going to be a game that no one really cared because it was 2 shitty teams. And all of a sudden, I'm getting all these questions. It's this makes me like this game even less with all these people kind of going on it. There was steam on Tyrod Taylor, and I'm like, who is driving this boat that Tyrod Taylor is getting pushed as this cheap quarterback? I didn't understand it. I don't know if you guys had the same thing happen to you.
I was on both sides. I was heavier on Tyrod after the Brissett Tua news. And the reason why I was on the game was how condensed the routes were for the last few weeks for both teams. And I felt like I knew where the ball was going. For Miami, it was going to Gesicki, Waddle, Gaskin, and then there was like an additional wide receiver somewhere that nobody really knew who it was going to be. And then for the Texans, it was Brandon Cooks and it was Nico Collins, in my opinion. And then you have like all these other guys that like you had Danny Amendola, who I thought was an okay play for his cheap value, but I'd play Nico Collins any day of the week over Danny Amendola. And then the tight ends were all sharing snaps, so you didn't know where it was going between them, and you knew the running backs really weren't in play. So that's why I liked the game, was I felt like the defenses, and didn't feel like, I know the defenses are bad for both teams as well. Like, I still believe that both defenses are pretty lousy. I guess the answer is that Tyrod Taylor, I expected to be efficient based off of his first 2 games that he played for the Texans, and it didn't happen.
Well,
so
maybe there was a little rust, right? Maybe that's something that people didn't factor in. That could have easily been rust. I get what you're saying on the Miami side, because I actually agree with you. Like, that was one of the reasons I liked Gesicki a ton, was because of how much, one, they love their tight end. They use their tight ends a ton, how much he was involved. And 2, there was really only 3 guys they were using in that offense, and he was one of the 3. Houston can't cover tight ends. We've known that. And I wanted to attack it. And I mean, Tambo, what about you? Were you getting flooded with any questions on that game? Because I got a ton.
Yeah, we got a bunch on Off the Chalk. I think Big T hit it on Morning Wood, and it made perfect sense. How he put it was becoming sort of the sneaky, not sneaky at all game of the week that everybody wanted to pick up the pieces. And I can see it from one side because, to everything you guys just said, not to repeat it, but I actually saw it more from the Brissett side because I thought it was pretty easy. We already knew Parker was out. There was stats being thrown around on Twitter and notifications people were getting where it was showing Gesicki's targets with Brissett. Waddle got a few targets with them the last time. And so you had a pretty condensed offense where you could just try and get after it if you wanted a really cheap stack. He was also, I think, $100 more than Jordan Love, who I think a lot of people had already talked themselves off of, saying you don't need to go there. There's other ways that you can get different on this slate, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why I think it came up. But one of the biggest things, and we talked about this a little bit, I think it was last week with the Ridley news coming out late, is the only thing, I wasn't on either side of that game very heavy, but where I should have adapted was more I was not playing the Kansas City Chiefs chalk D, but the Miami D was right there going up against Brissett, who, yes, is a backup like Jordan Love, but not even close to the same situation. Brissett is going to take sacks. He's going to make mistakes. He's had reps in the league. We know who he is and what he is, and you saw that. And they ended up doing okay, and that was a way that you could have got unique. And I was saying earlier, it happened the week before with Atlanta. Ridley goes out with personal news and some stuff with the mental stability maybe that he's talking about. He's going to get some help for, and hopefully he can make it back because just an awesome player in general. But everyone just immediately, okay, is it Olamide Zaccheaus? Is it Gage? Now you got to pile in on Kyle Pitts. This is going to be how we do it. And realistically, it just made Atlanta so much worse, and they could just tee off on Atlanta. So that's kind of the way you got to look at it a little bit more. And again, hindsight's 2020, but these are the ways you got to be thinking about it on the fly and as fast as possible to be able to make these changes and be able to or willing to go back within your builds to make those swaps.
Yeah, for sure. Any other
it just
things?
felt like a miss. I don't like it when you look at news of other situations, and this is what I mean by miss. When you look at news of other situations, you had the Vegas news that I feel like nobody adjusted enough to, where Vegas loses Henry Ruggs, who's a good wide receiver. Don't get me wrong. Like, he's an idiot for what he did, obviously, but you could have easily gone down and thought to yourself, okay, now they have 2 to 3 wide receivers and 1 tight end, and you avoid the running back situation. And then you run it back with the Giants piece that you feel most confident in. Or if you like Devontae Booker, which I think, Tambo, you said you like Devontae Booker.
It was in my core, yeah. And I also liked, I know JSU did, but I also like Derek Carr. So I was on that stack because of the ease of stacking, to your point, K. Renfro, Waller, if you wanted Booker or Tony or both on the other side. I thought that was the much better game to get after because everyone was talking about the pieces in a singular mold of, oh, Renfro's good or it could be Waller, Booker's good or it could be Tony, or you can just play them all. And I thought Derek Carr was the most capable with his side of the stack where those guys could just rack them up. Renfro did score early. Everything else didn't really go to plan. Booker had a pretty good game. Unfortunately, the injury got the bonus, lost yards on the next run and lost the bonus, and then also got injured on that play and went out. So there's nothing more tilting than that. But overall, yes, I think you're right. And I think that made a lot more sense to me as far as game to get after.
So
it was across the board though. Like you had New Orleans with the exact same situation where you could have avoided the quarterback, you play the wide receivers. And I'm not saying these things hit yesterday, but like there were spots that you could have taken opportunities in. And I, for some reason, focused in on this Miami-Houston game and the minimized trees, and Atlanta, New Orleans was just as good, just as cheap. And I just didn't even really look at them. And I should have, to be honest. So
one thing I will say, when Tambo brought up what Tony said on the Wood show, that's exactly how I felt too when I was getting all these questions. Was like, I thought it was going to be a sneakier game, and then all of a sudden I'm getting bombarded with these questions. I'm like, nope, not sneaky. It's definitely not going to be sneaky now. Everyone's talking about it. I didn't think people were. I thought the Giants and from what you guys said, the Raiders side, I thought that was a much sneakier game that had a chance. One thing that I guess, I don't know if you guys put stock into, but I think Derek Carr is a capable quarterback. I think he's a very solid quarterback who can get it done. He didn't have the best game at all, for sure. The Giants played solid on defense. They didn't really have the best game either. I just think one of the things maybe we do in DFS that maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong, and it's not a results thing, but just trusting capable but not great quarterbacks over just going to a situation where you have two very capable quarterbacks and just saying, you know what, I'm going to plant my flag here with the quarterback position on two sides where I can get two quarterbacks that I know are both capable, as opposed to one capable quarterback and then Daniel Jones. To me, trusting Daniel Jones is so hard. And I did it. I let myself do it here. And I think the game flow just got all messed up because there was some missed targets from both sides. They, ended up in field goals where it could have been touchdowns. I mean, Derek Carr missed a wide open Darren Waller. The Giants miscued on a few different things. So many things. Devontae Booker getting hurt, which kind of screwed it up where, like you said, he lost the bonus, which was hilarious. I mean, just so bad. I had him in my core too, Tambo. It didn't
cost me too much. I mean, it wasn't like I was in great shape.
It was just funny.
But it's still just annoying when that happens.
Yeah.
At least he got the bonus. He got there the next play, and then you're reading he's off the field. I'm like, what?
Tambo, on that slate, a couple points actually makes a difference on the slate.
It definitely hurt somebody. It hurt somebody.
Yeah.
Booker had one of the bigger days. And just to make a previous point on what you said earlier, I wasn't in love with Gaskin. I'm not saying that's, I put him in my core. I did like him more than enough. What my point would be, though, is this slate to me was so horrendous at running back. I even talked about it off the chalk. I did a very rare thing this week and played tight end in the flex. I almost never do that, but that's how bad the slate was and how there was options there that actually
Tambo, who'd you go? Who'd you go with?
In tight ends?
Yeah, who was your two tight ends?
Oh, I had
like
multiples.
the Kelsey,
I was rolling
Waller?
Through, but I had Waller. I had Gesicki, who you talked about. I thought the spot either way. I had Schultz. I was obviously in love with because of my Dak love. So he was getting in there. And then Albert O, I wasn't completely going to go away from him. I just said I would be underweight and he would mostly be in my Dallas stacks or to make something big work. And in the end, it didn't all work out, but that's just so. And then Conklin was another guy I really liked because while I wasn't playing Lamar to Brown, I had a lot of Conklin Brown mini stacks where I thought that could get me there in the builds that I had. But back to your last point, JSU, I'm with you. I say this all the time for two things. One, I like playing competent quarterbacks for my stacks, the Herberts, the Mahomes, the Daks, all these types of guys. And I like them just better than Lamar yesterday. Josh Allen, like there's 4 you can name that I actually think are really solid, good coach, good team, can put up points. There was reasons to be there, but that didn't work out yesterday either. None of those guys got there. And then I also do it for my one-offs. We did talk on this very show last week about it, but if my one-off, this is why like Booker, loved him. That's why I didn't mind Renfro as a one-off, because I was okay that he's attached to Derek Carr, and I was actually playing Derek Carr lineups as one of my 6 quarterbacks. But I just was saying I would be happier to have Keenan Allen as a one-off, Renfro as a one, something that was attached to the bigger name. Kelsey at tight end with no Mahomes. Still was another guy in there, by the way, that another tight end that I liked and I know you loved. So just an example yesterday, I thought there was way more tight ends. And just to be different, you still have to have some running backs in your pool. I don't like to run, give me 2 and I'm going all in on the slate. I always like to space it out, but that's just how it ended up for me yesterday. I did love Chubb, but it sucks. All my quarterbacks fell through besides Herbert and just didn't have the right combos, and mostly had Eckler in with him as well.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more on that your point about the tight ends and the running backs on this slate. And it just worked exactly to your point. I mean, that might be being a little results, but when you're saying it beforehand, it sounds better, right? You're kind of calling your shot before and saying
you're trying to pinpoint the slate. That's so many people wonder, like we're talking in the chat right now, and I know it's all jokes about the research side and getting coaching from Chess and all these things, but in general, just it's not necessarily more research. You don't have to do more. It's putting your mind in the right mindset going into a slate. That's why we do the show. We're now reviewing back, but a lot of this is things we talked about in advance, and you've got receipts. You were on the site. You were in the Discord. You watch the shows. You have cores, et cetera, where I'm not spending necessarily more time on the players. I'm spending more time on what's the field doing? What can I do to be unique and different? Is there ways that I can get there and leverage myself up and then think about these things? That's why a situation like the Brissett news makes me wonder about, come on, what are we going to do with, the Houston D? Didn't think about that as quickly at the end.
Yeah. So there are a couple things, because you're talking about more from a mindset standpoint. And I want to talk about a few of those things because I get really good conversations with my family members who I have 3 brothers. 2 of them play DFS. They don't play as much as me. They're really very new to it. And they play a decent amount, but they don't play like a ton of money every slate, but they're trying to learn. Right. And my little brother recently just started playing, like he plays like $200 on a slate on a football Sunday. You know what I mean? And I was talking to him about it, and he has such like recency bias. It's crazy. His mindset. So like if he rostered someone who didn't do well the week before, that guy's immediately out the next week. Like immediately. Nick Chubb, he had in every lineup he made last week, fell through, obviously didn't do well. And the mindset of some people, it's amazing. I said to him, I go, you have to play him this week. You just have to. Off of principle, you played him on every single team. You obviously loved him. His price didn't move, and he's in a great spot again. But the mindset, he literally couldn't do it. And I think that it's a great topic that I know we've discussed before, but something to re-hit on for people as we're 9 weeks into the season. And I'm sure people have bias. You can't have that type of bias on good players in good systems with good coaching staffs. You can do that with Daniel Jones. You can do that with Jacoby Brissett or Myles Gaskins or Tua or Trevor Lawrence, anyone from, like, you can do that with all the bad teams. You can't do that with good players when they have good price tags, are in good spots. And I've just seen it. Like my older brother's the same way. He's you know what I mean? But he's starting to learn, like, okay, like I got to go right back to a guy. I can't just completely X him out the next week. And I think it's a good thing for us to talk about real quick, because the mindset, we've talked about it before. It's a very like mental thing, DFS in ways. You have to have the right mindset for winning, in my opinion.
Here's a question for you. I'm looking just briefly at the schedule for next week. First game that I'm seeing on the schedule is the Jaguars versus the Colts. Are you going to avoid the Colts next week solely because the Jaguars held the Buffalo Bills to 6 points?
No. Well, I wouldn't avoid them, but I wouldn't avoid them, but I don't trust the Jag side at all.
Sure.
You know, I mean, I might trust Michael Pittman, but again, to my point of, do we want to get heavy in games where there are two sides and one is capable and one is not? What are we doing with those sides? Because I think that, back to my point, is what I'm trying to talk about. Might just be something we need to maybe avoid more in ways, you know, or not go as heavy on, just because we trust one side.
Yeah, I felt like, so just going back to this past week, I felt like Philly was hitting a point where they were ineffective when it comes to DFS because they're not because Jalen Hurts is spreading the wealth too much, except for their tight end position, because he loves throwing it to the tight end. And I was wrong. So wrong on, he finally figured out that, hey, maybe Devontae Smith is my best wide receiver on that team. Like, maybe I should be throwing it to Devontae Smith a little bit more than I have been. And Dallas Goedert's my second best option on that team. They still have this like run first mentality, which I don't understand for that team, because I don't think that their running backs are that good and their offensive line's mediocre as well.
How are they having a run first mentality after their best running back gets injured? I still don't get that.
Because maybe Miles Sanders wasn't his best. Maybe Miles Sanders wasn't their best running back. Who knows?
Or it's because guys like Dallas Goedert can't catch a layup 45-yard touchdown to start the game right in his damn hands, walk in and drops it. That's maybe why too. Another tight end I liked yesterday that really screwed me in that spot.
Love Dallas Goedert yesterday.
I'm going to stick with him. I think he's a great play still moving forward. They'll keep going after him. He's had the opportunities. It just hasn't got there yet. But since they've removed Ertz, it's been even better, and as it should have been. But I'm just saying that's a spot where I can pick it off. But JSU, why don't you start this one? I think it's a good question. Wes brings it up in the chat and says, I always get confused by the I'm not picking players, I'm building lineups phrase. Doesn't it help knowing if they're good? You know, doesn't knowing the difference between Khalif Raymond and A.J. Brown help? You can go about it your own way, but, putting it into context and how it, lineup construction matters in most cases, at least in large field tournaments, than exactly who you're picking. But at the same time, I think who you're picking can also lead to certain lineup construction. So give me your thoughts on that. I think it's a good question for the show.
Yeah, so worrying more about lineup construction is something we talk about a ton when we do the lineup reviews, right? And that's where you can directly pull what we're talking about. And we can talk about it more as we get into the actual lineup reviews, because I think that gives you an actual example of what we're going to talk. It's literally like, so if you're a person who's like a visual person, like for me, I need to see it. I need to hear it. I'm very visual and audio. Like I need both, right? Some people it's visual. Some people, they can just hear what I'm saying and it'll click right in their head. So I'm going to say it, but when we do the lineup review, we're going to talk about it. And this answer will be answered in the lineup review. But when you build a team, right, from a lineup construction standpoint, what we're talking about is we want, when we talk about stacking, correlation, running back with defense, quarterbacks, wide receivers, we want our quarterback with at least one target from his side, maybe two, bringing it back with someone. Maybe we want a mini stack of another game we like with two other wide receivers, or a running back and a wide receiver. So like, for instance, if you didn't like Derek Carr or Daniel Jones, but you liked Hunter Renfrow and Devontae Booker in that game, there was a nice mini stack to get a piece of that game in your lineup construction with your Lamar stack of Lamar, Marquise Brown, Bateman, and, bringing it back with, I don't know, Justin Jefferson or Tyler Conklin, who is a cheap tight end. That's just a real quick giving you a lineup construction right there where everything it makes sense, right? We're not trying to just pick off a ton of one-offs like, okay, I'm going to play Lamar naked, and then I'm going to play Myles Gaskins, I'm going to play Devontae Booker, I'm going to play, like all these guys from different teams, not even guys from the same games, and I'm just going to take – Tambo gives the best he says it's like making a 3 or 4 team parlay, an 8 team parlay, where it's like, okay, that's a lot harder to hit. You know what I mean? eight teams. That's really hard, but 3 or 4,
If
that's
you're
a
just
little
going to
more
play
reasonable.
all the good plays and then expect to get all of them right, that's what I'm saying. They're all singularities, one off the other. It's really tough. It makes sense, but one, you could be leaning into the same situation others are. I'm not really worried about having a duped lineup because there's 9 spots to fill. It's not that. I'm saying that it goes away from some of the correlation things that make it a little bit easier. And at the same token, we are playing a salary game. So yes, AJ Brown is much better than Khalif Raymond on paper. Yesterday, let's use slate application. I would like to have Marquise Brown before I would like to have Rashad Bateman. But there's a scenario there where Bateman opens things up and makes it work. There's a scenario there where people that have the Marquise Brown lineup have the balanced running backs. And let's say yesterday ended up being a pay up at running back. That's how people ended up getting there. So even though Marquise Brown is better than Bateman, you then get a different construction when you pay down to Bateman because you probably spend up at tight end to a Kelsey or at running back to a Kamara or a Cook. Like that would have worked in that exact stack, for example. So you end up getting on to different constructions. And we used a great example just a few weeks back with the Kyler one before, not DPJ yesterday when people actually had him in their mind. Not, mind you, he wasn't that high owned, but people at least thought about him. But the week he went off and blew up the slate and people were saying, well, how the heck would you ever have got to DPJ if you went with Kyler and said, I'm just going to go with his main guy and I'm going to commit to it? It's Hopkins. Now I need someone to make those two fit because they were very expensive. Oh, DPJ on the other side. That just fits the build. Again, talking about just the build and not the players. It may look bad. You may not want to trust it going into the slate, but when DPJ gets 3 touchdowns and breaks the slate, the only way you got to that is by constructing your lineup that way and going after what was still a good starting point in Kyler and Hopkins. But that's what led that guy to being into your build. And like JSU said, we'll do much more slate application as we get through it. And I know the first lineup we're going to review, I can't remember if it's Benair or who set it up there, but it's literally textbook, the style that I like building. But we'll get into it more, like JSU said, when we get there for sure.
Let me add one thing though, just for like understanding of situations. In a perfect world, we're winning 6 weeks of NFL in shipping. But really, when you really realistically think about it, if you win 1 out of the 18 weeks this year, you're going to be taking care of yourself. As long as you're doing bankroll management that you should be doing, you're going to take care of yourself for an entire NFL season. And that's why the correlation build sometimes feels like you're just missing on pieces that you should be considering over it. But long term, the correlation build, at least in the 3 of us, in our opinion, and most people in RPS, believe that correlation is the route that is going to allow you to, again, not have to hit the 8-team parlay. You see those really great pictures on Twitter of the 18 parlay. You may be like, holy shit, they have a chance of turning $10 into 20,000 or whatever. But like, let's really be realistic for a second. How often does that happen when instead all you need to do is hit that 3-team? And that's what I try to do, at least, is I'm going to take yes, there's a chance you're taking by hitting those large parlays, but in the end, what I'm trying to do is hit that correlation once in an 18-week season, and I'm paying off my bankroll at that time. Again, I'd love to win 5 or 6, but in the end, my goal is to hit 1 week where I'm winning the 6 digits and I'm taken care of for the entire year.
Yeah, same. And I couldn't say it better. And I know the books now allow like single game parlays, which are correlated parlays. They used to not even allow this because it was so off the wall and they'll say, oh, that's too correlated. You can't finish the bet. But this is the situation in DFS. We are allowed to correlate it as much as we want. You can run a 4-3 game stack with a running back and a DST and have 2 things need to have if you want. But I think this is a good conversation. So I'm going to continue it just for a second, JSU, not to steal the thunder and where we're going. But he added a second piece, and it ties in directly to what K. Fallick just said. And I'm going to give some real life examples and try and help understand this a little bit better for people, hopefully. But is 80% projected total ownership too far off for optimal builds? I've heard people say capping at 125%. Most mine were 70 to 80. I've talked about this in the past. I don't want something too heavy in ownership, but what I will say is I can build you a super correlated lineup where everyone's at 3%. Doesn't mean it's going to be a good lineup. You can make a lineup with 9 rare pieces that you're under the target of total ownership, but it doesn't help. On the contrary, you can build a really correlated lineup that is still a completely unique construction. Back to your original question, Wes, why it matters construction versus the other. You can have a pay up at tight end, 2 pay up at running back, and pay way down at wide receiver, still have a bunch of ownership in there, but it's still correlated, and it's not a construction most of the field is on, and you can get away with that. So to me, I would say, it's no different than in Showdown. Some people say, oh, you just do every lineup with 5,000 on the table or cap at 49K. Well, if you cap at 45K, you could put everyone you want in the lineup that's chalk. It doesn't matter because you left 5,000 on the table and you're still going to be unique. If you go to 49.9 though, I would want way less ownership in my lineup because the more you have that's the common play, the more you're going to be duped. Go ahead, K-Falik.
It's often not correlated. I think that's the thing is that people don't feel comfortable sometimes playing 4 guys from the same game or 5 guys from the same game. And even if you get the chalky pieces, even having one different piece and you're getting the other 3 or 4 that are chalky makes you different and unique anyways, because the people that play three or four pieces are usually going to have some similarities, but people aren't playing 3 or 4 often. And then when you get one piece that's a little different, you're unique enough in the situation to be able to really feel as if you're unique. But in the end, if you're hitting that the 4 players from that game that are even if they're 15 or 20%, you're going to be above in the top 5% if that game is the game that hits, because not everybody's playing 4 pieces. They're going to miss on their 5th piece. They're going to miss on their 4th piece, or they're only playing 3 of them instead of 4 or whatever. And you're being unique by doing what you're doing.
Right. And unique when it comes to lineup building. I mean, we can take this in a bunch of different ways. I talked about on the Up the Lock show where I was just giving an example for Lamar stacks. And I was telling people how people hate double stacking Lamar just because he's Lamar. He's going to rush. He's going to run a lot. And when he runs for 2 touchdowns instead of throws for 2 touchdowns, it's going to tilt the shit out of you when you have 2 guys sitting there in your lineups that are pass catchers with them and they do nothing. So it's honestly, in my eyes, a lot of times it's unique to double stack Lamar because I don't think people do it as much as you would think. Even with the lineup building, I think more people see him as a naked quarterback or pair him with one. And you can use that to your advantage. That's honestly how I took down, I think it was the Yahoo tournament like 2 years ago, double stacking Lamar. And it was my main thought process of I double stacked him. I brought it back with one guy, and it was the simple stack. It was the Andrews, Marquise Brown stack. They were low owned. Both of them were low owned. And I knew they were going to be because no one wanted to double stack with Lamar. And I knew that coming in. And that was my whole thought process and theory behind the lineup build. And the lineup build hit. And I only built 20 lineups, and they were all Lamar double stacks. And it crushed.
So let me give an example of this so people can put this into a little bit more perspective if you're a numbers person. And I wish I could have pulled it up before and I didn't know we were going in this direction, but I'm looking at the 333, the Wildcat, and let's just say that your route that you chose for this Baltimore Minnesota stack is playing Dalvin Cook from Minnesota. He was 15% owned. Lamar Jackson and Marquise Brown are the main 2 pieces that you're getting. And then you can even think about this in a way is who is a piece that you could get for cheap that is in this Lamar's last piece of it. And the options obviously are going with the expensive or not the expensive, the chalkier Bateman. I'm trying to find his ownership right now. I didn't pull.
He had to be like 10, 12%, right?
This thing's so annoying. There it is. Okay. He was 7.37. Okay. But you could even so you're unique already there enough because you're grabbing those pieces. It may not have worked this week because Dalvin Cook only got you 15 at 9K. He was looking good in my opinion, and then just slowed down quickly somehow.
Honestly, 15 on this slate's a good. If you told me all my guys got like 15, I would be pretty happy with Lamar. Yeah. Like,
but you could, but in that piece, you're getting, let's see, 70% ownership between those 4 players. and that's covering 4 positions, which is a solid ownership for a stack that you think is going to be chalky, with Lamar Jackson and Marquise Brown being 2 of the chalkier pieces in it. You're unique because you're playing 4, is what I'm saying there. If you really want to get off the board and you would have hit, the way it would have been Devontae Freeman. Not saying that you're getting there, but like it at least made a little bit of sense. Running back was shitty this week. You wanted to pay up in different spots. Devontae Freeman has turned into like the receiving back for Lamar Jackson. Like however you want to look at it, Devontae Freeman has become a little bit more of a priority for that team. That's getting unique. You're already unique with the 4 you've built, but now you could throw in Devontae Freeman and he's the off the board, like, holy crap, 20, 150 max, 20 max, whatever way you want to look at it. And there's an opportunity there.
But then back to the correlation standpoint, let's just say you played those 4 guys. I mean, then you could go to a game that's going to be unowned and say, you know what, I'm going to play Devonta Smith and friggin' Jared Cook. And I personally weren't playing them. I'm just saying from an ownership standpoint, there are 2 low-owned guys from a game that outside of like a few pieces from the Chargers and 1 piece from Philly wasn't going to be high-owned. And you could take that's where you could come in and take 2 lower-owned guys from another game and you correlate them. Boom, you got a little mini stack there. And that's a lineup construction right there that would end up being unique. It's just the way it goes. It has nothing to do with them hitting. You could play friggin' I don't know, like you could play Quez Watkins and whoever else from the Chargers. But that the point is that you're taking lower owned guys, making a little mini stack from another game with your 4-man Baltimore stack, Minnesota stack, and boom, that is a unique type build right there.
Yep.
All right. Before we get to these lineups that we're going to review, anything else you guys want? Oh, Jordan Love. What were your guys' takes on Jordan Love? Because I wrote it up in my slate plan. I didn't have any, but I did write up that I felt like he's not. I've watched him play. I felt like he's not a good enough like actual thrower of the football, and that he's really just pretty much an athlete, and that's not going to work even against a bad Kansas City team that's going to constantly make him throw. And if you watch that game, they literally just gave him one-on-one opportunity the entire game. A thing that if Aaron Rodgers was the quarterback, they would have never done, because they would have gotten destroyed if Aaron Rodgers was the quarterback in that game, they would have lost 38-3 or 38-13 or whatever it was. Like they would have gotten destroyed if they let Aaron Rodgers have that type of one-on-one. They would have never done that if Aaron Rodgers was the quarterback anyways, but I'm just saying, if he was back there, that would have been like a 5 touchdown. Devontae Adams would have had 200 yards. Like it would have been ridiculous. And that's how bad Jordan Love was, where they said, you know what, we're just going to send 6 or 7 guys on almost every play and just say, you know what? And you could tell Devontae Adams was frustrated. Like he was sitting on the sidelines a couple plays that I'm like, you know, normally he'd be in the game right now, but it's like second down. I know they're going to run the football. He's just sitting on the sideline. I'm like, yeah, I get it. He's pissed right now. I don't blame him, but it was just funny to watch. I thought it was hilarious. I thought that, you know, this is what the Packers, you know, had to deal with, was a Chiefs defense that literally had no respect around the league. They're terrible. And they were just getting owned by this Chiefs defense. That was awful. And it was because of the quarterback play.
Aaron Rodgers is sitting down, enjoying his immuno, whatever he's taking to take care of the COVID issues.
Was he laughing the entire game? Like, seriously.
He had to be laughing in frustration, though, also, because Green Bay wasted, in my opinion, a first-round draft pick on this guy, who I said to myself when I saw it, and I don't remember what, I guess it was 2 years ago now. I sat there saying to myself, if you're a Green Bay fan, how can you enjoy seeing a guy sit on your bench, your first round draft pick, sit on the bench for God knows how many years? And now Aaron Rodgers has been pissed for God knows how long that they wasted a first round draft pick. He got his first opportunity because Aaron Rodgers makes decisions based off of whatever he wants to, Joe Rogan, and he's now sitting there watching this guy, and he's like, I told you so. I don't need this guy as a first-round draft
That's the
pick.
conspiracy right now, K-Falik, is that he got them to 7-1 or whatever, and then said, I'm going to make something up and let them get buried with this guy after how the offseason stuff went. And now let's see what their guy Jordan Love that they needed so bad can do. Meanwhile, they had to watch Tom Brady go to the Bucs and ship a championship to show it's definitely still possible with these high caliber quarterbacks that are a little bit older than what the rest of the quarterbacks coming into the league are, the Herberts and the Mahomes and all that, but they're still getting the job done. So I don't believe in the conspiracy aspect of it. I'm just saying it is pretty crazy to see. And I was not on him, JSU. I said, listen, if you want to make your one, I was behind the fact you want to make your one Love lineup with all your favorite guys just to make it work. And that was before the other news and everything had come out. But I said I would put Adams and Tyreek in it or whatever and play just stack that game. And that's the way to get both of them and pray that it does what you think it's going to do that I do not think it's going to do. But that's the only way I would think about doing it. And other than that, just play good quarterbacks, play good spots. And it didn't even work out. That didn't work out. But I'm just saying that's how I want to put my money behind and build lineups, because the Love situation pretty much worked out exactly how I would expect.
Right. Like if you're playing Jordan Love, you're going all in, right? You're pretty much just like, okay, because this is what I need to happen.
15 points. If he just hits his 3X, I'm good.
That's what I don't understand, though. People were saying like, oh, he can just hit 15. And a bunch of people said that to me, like not just one person, like a bunch of people. And I'm just sitting there thinking like, but do you want 15? Like when Lamar puts up 35, are you really like, oh, but Jordan Love gave you 15? Like, no, you're not. And on this slate, it was the worst slate to do it anyways, because there weren't that many like high, scoring outputs anyways from a result standpoint. But before we even knew that, it's like, if you really were just playing him because you were like, oh, I want my 15 and I'm good to go. It's like, I feel like that's not a route to like shipping a tournament, because you know how many other things you need to go right with. You need all of those studs to hit big time scores to ship. And now if you're going to tell me I think Jordan Love's going to carve them up and he's got a chance for 20, 25 fantasy points, maybe even more, I'm like, shit, well, 4,400, you get that guy in there and you stack the shit out of that game.
Let me jump in on that point for 2 seconds, because we talked about this before on this show as well. And it's so important to understand this, I think. The only way that I would even think about playing him was with his own guys in that game. Because what I'm trying to say is when you go to him and then you put in, let's say, Zeke, Eckler, Jamar Chase, you're jamming in all these other studs. Like if those studs hit their ceilings, or even if you get a little secondary stack with them, if they're hitting their ceilings, it's very likely their quarterbacks went to the moon and that you were missing out on that. So you're still getting lapped. So it was either Love with his own guy and the other side, and that game goes off to make that work, or avoid it, because otherwise I think you're putting yourself in a bad spot. So that's just one thing I think about when the way you're building the lineup, just to stack studs. It's not the same as other sports. It's, the correlation matters, as we've talked about.
Yeah, Wes, I love Javonte. I'll play him even if he gets me 8 points. That's my guy. That's the only guy. I'll play Javonte all week. By the way, I don't know if you guys watch. You definitely watched the Denver game because you had a ton of Dallas, Tambo. Yeah. Did you see Javonte Williams? Did you see Javonte Williams carrying dudes?
Yes.
Fucking multiple plays where he just carried dudes for like 5 to 12 yards and then stayed on his feet after he got like tackled by 2 guys. How the fuck? He's going to be so good. I can't
trade Melvin Gordon, man. They needed to try and get value for Gordon to leave Javonte. Free Javonte is a better movement than free Odell.
Free Javonte is way better than free. Oh, by the way, Donovan Peoples-Jones definitely better than Odell Beckham. Like I said that, but Odell sucks. Free Javonte needs to be a t-shirt, and it needs to be trending on Twitter. It needs to be everywhere. Like, free that man. That dude is a fucking monster.
We've made it almost an hour through the show and haven't looked at one lineup yet, so I think it's time.
All right, after Simon, let's get the first lineup up for the people.
Free Javonte movement has moved me into the interested in looking at lineups movement.
Oh, stop it, K-Falik. If you watch Javonte play, you'd be singing a different tune right now.
I love Javonte. I love him. I think he's a very talented running back. But also, I also know where the league is, and having 2 and 3 backs on every team, and it's very frustrating. And I don't know if it'll ever get to the point where Javonte will be free. So I'm not going to keep on pushing for it to happen.
I think what's worse is there are definitely some running backs who need the split. You know what I mean? From like a health stand, they just couldn't handle it. I think Javonte is not one of those dudes. I think he could definitely handle a full workload. But let's get the first lineup up. I think it's B square, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see here. I'm gonna pull it up right now, but I just want to make sure. Simon, we got B square's lineup on the okay. The either one's fine. Which one do you have? The B squared one? Yep, perfect. All right, so we got the Justin Herbert, Dalvin Cook, Nick Chubb, Devonta Smith, Tyler Boyd, Bateman, Jared Cook, Keenan Allen, and the Bills defense. So he's got the Herbert, 2% owned, nice stacked up with Jared Cook and Keenan Allen. But Keenan Allen came in at way lower ownership, 5% for Keenan Allen. That's kind of shocking. I thought he was going to be more popular than that, but very nice. And then Devonta Smith as the bring back at 1%. He's got a ton of low owned guys. Then he had Tyler Boyd with Nick Chubb. So he had a nice little mini stack there from that game. And he had the Bills defense, obviously. And then Dalvin Cook with Bateman. So Tambo, I'll bring it to you first because this is, I would assume, a lineup that, from a construction standpoint, I feel like you're on board with.
Yeah, textbook style. This is literally my style right here. Perfect build across the board, and a couple things that go beyond just to go behind. Okay, that's you correlate it and you're good. Like we said earlier, you can still have some chalk in there. He's got Bateman as the cheap chalk. He's got Nick Chubb as probably the best cheap chalk. 6,700 to me was crazy. And he made people realize that. And 38% is a lot, but it's fine. Bills D at 4K, expensive, but it fit with everything else that worked. Went away from Eckler by going with the double stack, using the tight end and the receiver in Allen. Ran it back with Smith. And the step I would say that it goes beyond is with Dalvin Cook and with Bateman. I love that, like a secondary stack, because it's the expensive guy is the running back that can take away from Jefferson, Thielen, Cousins stacks. Not that there was any yesterday, just to give an example, or many at least, but to give the example of there's a chance he gets there on the ground, and then they need to come back, but you don't necessarily need Lamar with Bateman for Bateman to have a big day. It could be the last minute bomb in garbage time that gets Bateman there after Dalvin Cook runs over them for 3 touchdowns in a surprising fashion. So I really like the complete setup, but I like the steps further with the way he did it. And then using Boyd as the cheapest and also less owned of the wide receivers for Cincy across from Chubb really ate in and split that Chubb ownership down some. So the overall build was very solid.
I just say, I want to be clear that I grabbed this for B Square because he sent in the incorrect style of the lineup, and I grabbed it from the Run Pure Sports Tournament of Champions. So there's a lot of inflated ownership in there for sure. So just so you know, I think that we have to take ownership with a grain of salt in this type of situation because, as I said, Dalvin Cook was 15% owned in the 333, which had 6,000 entries or whatever like that. But overall, listen, it's a great build. It's my exact build that I create in these type of spots as well. I love the way I struggled with what Philly has been doing lately, and he took a chance on it in a good scripted game and getting 2 pieces from the Chargers, which is a great way to approach it with Herbert, and finding the low-owned piece of Philly, which was Devonta Smith. He was the low-owned piece that went off when a lot of people went in other directions for Philly. But yeah, the Dalvin Cook piece, nobody was on him in the RPS world, as you can see with his 6% ownership. And you got the pieces, and the only thing I will say is you got unlucky with Tyler Boyd in that script. Like, Cleveland just smashed Cincinnati, and Burrow looked like an absolute joke, and they went to T. Higgins a lot and they kept passing to Jamar Chase, who couldn't catch the ball. It must have been that they brought back the footballs from the preseason that he didn't like or something. But Tyler Boyd didn't have it. He got all the snaps, he got all the routes, he did everything right, and didn't get the ball. And then obviously the Bills defense, even though they got 8, it's an underwhelming performance when you look at it in the grand scheme of things for what should have been expected in that game.
Yeah, the review tells all here. We're talking about this lineup like it shipped. It literally missed by like 50 or 60 points, but that's how good the construction is. So, for B Square to take it away, it's an incredible lineup. And 168 was a nice score yesterday, considering. I'm just saying that's how crazy. I'm never talking results oriented. I'm always talking how did you go into it? And I really think it's a very well thought out lineup. Makes a ton of sense overall. And again, it just didn't work out in the sense of, crushing a $20 milli maker or something, but would have been pretty decent in some of the other tournaments out there and got you some cash back. So overall, it's more about the construction, like we always say, than it is how did you do with it. And that's what we're trying to look for on this show. And we're trying to go through these builds to discuss some of the stuff that we see.
Yeah, I know when DMing just real quick earlier with B Squared, he even said to me, I felt like my process was right on, even though, he had the right mindset, I think. He goes, yes, I could have played Higgins over Boyd, but I thought overall the process was right. And I think just to reaffirm that, I agree with him. I think when looking at this lineup, the process was for sure right. And for sure, you can be results oriented if you want and say, yeah, I could have played T Higgins, and T Higgins was ended up as the better play from a result standpoint. From Tyler Boyd, yes,
I would say one thing there quick is just that just so you know, B Square, because I know he's watching too, and anybody out there following it, the lineup was more than unique enough to be able to play who you liked of Higgins and Boyd. You did not need to play. I called that out earlier, that I said that I liked that you had the cheapest and the lowest owned, but to be clear, you could have got away with whatever. You didn't have Gaskin, you didn't have Booker, you didn't have Rent, you didn't have all Albert O, you didn't have Eckler. You just had so many places you were already off the board and constructed nice that you didn't need to make that decision based on ownership if that's what you did. I'm just saying you could have played whichever Bengal you liked, but I like that you were planning to play a Bengal no matter what, just to round it out. So either way, incredible process there. I love it.
Yeah, and I thought Tyler Boyd was a sneaky play in that game. Yeah. I thought so just to be clear. But again, to Tambo's point, this is where it's hard when people are asking questions and we don't really know the basis of the question based on their build, right? And this is where sometimes it gets tough because, if you look at this lineup, it is very unique. It's so unique to the point that Tambo's 100% right. You could have played a chalk piece like T. Higgins instead of Boyd and been fine from an ownership standpoint, totally fine. And now it could have just been that B Squared liked Boyd like I did. It could have just been that. And that's why he played him.
And that's what I'm saying. Play who you like there because you were able to.
Yes, but don't do it based off of ownership because the ownership, and maybe though Tambo, he just got the ownership wrong too. That could be something where maybe he thought
in the chat right now. So we'll see what he says. But I love the other point you just brought up, JSU, is what makes it tough. And guys, we'll always answer your questions. Those watching this are obviously dialed into getting better. We appreciate it. We love it. I personally love doing the show every week, not just because the wonderful crew that I'm with, my boys Kevin and Johnny, but I do love talking through this stuff. It personally helps me as well. But I think one of the key points was that, when JSU talks about, we get in the Discord all the time, Boyd or Higgins. Well, it really comes down to a lot of things. I'm not saying I want you to throw your whole lineup into the chat. I know that AP's made some sort of questions and rules and situational stuff that makes sense in NBA, at least in the Discord, where it's kind of like, let me know what's going on from a grand scheme or general state of things within your build. If you say, look, I'm already way off the board with my lineup. It's a Herbert, know this, none of the chalk running backs besides Chubb. I'm wondering if I should round out a secondary stack of Chubb with Boyd or Higgins. I would just say that you could play whoever you want, but at least then you'd have the confidence in knowing. And B Squared just answered and said, I went with JSU's thoughts on Boyd from the Up to Lock show. Said the same thing this morning, that I was already different enough and didn't even need to go down. That's true. And that's all I was making sure you knew. And that's awesome, is that when you're already off the board like that, play who you want in that spot and don't really let ownership dictate it. It sounds like you didn't, which is great.
Yeah, in this situation, Cincinnati is it's a guessing game outside of Jamar Chase and Joe Mixon. And I think you need to realize that every week it's going to be between T and Tyler Boyd is going to be a question that you consistently get when rounding out a stack, because Joe Mixon and Jamar Chase are more expensive. And so like that mid-tier guy, that guy 5K or so, there's not going to be a good answer to it unless there is just an absolute reason, whether it's defensive opportunities, whatever it may be, scripting that you do. Like they're both very similar in what their roles are. T. Higgins has more upside. Tyler Boyd has more opportunities, I'd say, usually for your PPR world. So it's like you're gonna be frustrated when you get it wrong, but there is no wrong answer usually to the situation.
Just to be clear too, because he says he went off my thoughts on the Up to Lock show. My thoughts, and I did like Boyd over Higgins. And my thoughts were that, just so people know, because I know not everyone watches the Up to Lock show, my thoughts were clear that I thought, because Cleveland they're not a team that blitzes a ton, and they're a team that'll give up. So I thought it set up for a Tyler Boyd underneath type script where he is getting peppered with targets, because they're going to give that over the big shots, which we know Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, they get the big shots down the field. Tyler Boyd doesn't get really those big shots. And I thought also that Cleveland was going to win the game. So I thought the game script might actually set up well in a trailing script for Tyler Boyd on top of it, because I bet Cleveland. I told everyone on the show, once Odell Beckham got traded, I thought Cleveland was in a much better spot, because I said on Wednesday's show I was going to stay away from this game. I wasn't going to bet Cleveland. Once Odell Beckham left, my whole thoughts changed. I was like, I like this game a lot better now. Baker's going to play better, I think, with just Odell, not even have to think about him. And yeah, those are my thoughts. It obviously didn't turn out that way. I was wrong on Tyler Boyd from the standpoint he didn't get as much opportunity as I thought he was going to get, even though, like K. Alex said, he was on the field, he ran the routes, he was there. He just wasn't Joe Burrow's first, second, even third option. You know what I mean? And that's what sucks. So, didn't work out.
One last thing too, JSU, is just for those watching that say, well, I really liked Higgins or whatever. I would say this: when you're unique enough, to our original point, always be looking at your 2v2s. So if, for example, let's say this lineup was a max salary and he didn't have the money, well, it was 5,000 for Boyd, 4,000 for Buffalo. If you really wanted Higgins, you can look at it. Just me telling you what I do, I always start with the defense. And I'm talking like my 3 max stuff. I'll look and say, okay, I really would prefer Higgins. I disagree with JSU. Making an example here, I want Higgins here. I think it's him. I think he's wrong on that. I need to get to Higgins. I always start at the D. You would have had like a Saints D going up against Matt Ryan with a weaker setup. Like, you could have got to these situations, but when you've got a good lineup that you're all in, that you like, and you're putting it into something maybe higher dollar, and you think you're unique enough, because now you can kind of learn that from watching the show and know where you stand and run it out. I would always look at the 2v2s or 3v3s to try and get what you want, and don't just settle because Boyd works and now he said it's good. I'm not saying you did. I'm just saying in general, so everyone watching knows that that's how I always look into it and treat my lineups in this higher dollar or 1 to 3 max stuff especially.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. You just wrote in the chat. He said he agreed with my breakdown at the time. Yeah, I mean, that's just, so sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. We'll have to figure that out. That situation is going to be tough, like K. Alex said, all year. I think it's going to be Boyd, Higgins. It looks clearer and clearer, though, that Joe Burrow might just have Chase as his guy, and everyone else, maybe it's Higgins too, and everyone else is just in the back burner.
Just something to keep an eye on.
One thing I also missed, fucking Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon wasn't even like a thought as a pivot off of all those running backs that were talked about. And not because he scored the 2 touchdowns. I just didn't even think of him as like a pivot, because he is a similar guy to those other guys where he is the main guy on that team. Like, he is clearly just a workhorse for that team. And he didn't even come in my thought process, because I played Chubb. He didn't even come in my thought process as like a good guy to have like a mini stack with Chubb, because I was on so much Chubb. And that was something I'm going to say, just from a thought process, I didn't even I didn't even look to. That was bad.
He was
by
just
me.
in the week before with Michael Carter. Remember,
Yep.
we just stacked them the week before.
Yep.
So I was going to say this. We're getting to the halfway point now. I think 9 weeks and everything that's in the books. So one thing to look at for me, it's like Minnesota, Cincy, and Cleveland. It's like those two, if those three teams are involved, the other side can be there. I'm just saying if those three teams are involved, you can kind of be okay with putting the running back on the other side because they just run so much or end up utilizing the running back in multiple ways so often that you can go against that if you want to. I'm talking Dalvin Cook, Chubb, Hunt when he's there, and then now with Cincy, it's been the same with Mixon since he's been getting that full workload. So I just think those are the three teams where that's what happens, JSU. We get so high on Chubb, which we both were. You always are, but I was certainly high on him this week anyway. And you just don't even think about it. You're like, oh, I'll just go to the other side with Higgins or Boyd, or I'll get the Joe Burrow stack to go back against it, and you just miss Mixon.
And this is why too. The reason why I'm saying I was wrong, it has nothing to do with what Mixon did as a result.
Right.
It had all to do with the fact that I wasn't on the passing game for Cincy, and I should have been trying to find someone to correlate the mini stack with Chubb on the other side, like we try to do all the time. I should have tried to find one guy, and I didn't even fit, like Mixon didn't even cross my mind. I just totally just blanked him out of my head, saying like, no, I'm not playing him. And I ended up not playing any of those guys because I even though I liked Boyd, I didn't, in that price range, I just didn't find, there were so many guys in that range to pick from. I had a ton of Hunter Renfrow. I had a ton of Jerry Jeudy because I paired him with Zeke as like a mini stack with Zeke because I didn't end up with as much Albert O because I had Tyler Conklin. So like there were so many things that led to like not playing a Cleveland, a Cincy run back. And I didn't even think of playing Joe Mixon in the running back spot where I could have, because I had the spots to do it. And he would have been an also pivot off of a chalky position where it was clear to me there was 3 or 4 like chalk running backs at the top. Mixon was not one of them.
And we didn't even love them all. That's the other point. We said it multiple times in the show. We didn't even love that position. So why not just let it get buried to a game correlation where it's like it makes sense. So
yep. That's what it's. Simon, you can throw up the next. I have the video up so I can see it. So you can throw up whatever the next lineup is, and we'll get to it in a stack. But yeah, that's something where just from a process standpoint, God, that was wrong. It was wrong, and I should have at least talked about it, crossed my mind a little, and yep, I got you, Simon. I didn't, so that's something we can do better next time around too. And I will say it's something, Tambo, do you like when you have like your guys that you love, maybe it's like your top running backs, do you first, when you have that, do you look the other side right away and say, okay, who do I like from this side if I'm not playing the quarterback?
Well, I was going to bring this up. I know I want to get to the next lineup here, but just a real quick thought on what you just said there. I think if you're high on a secondary stack, you need to think a third level to that of what could go different within that secondary stack. So if you were so high on Chubb and you already had a bunch of Boyd, then that's where I'm saying you'd have to think about what if it's not Boyd. And I think most people just think automatically Higgins or Chase or whatever else. You have to go different with that stack, or maybe even flip it the other side and go Mixon with DPJ. Talking about just how you can flip something so quickly. Mixon makes way more sense. He was less owned, not saying you would have ended up wanting them both, but just to show it off, flip your stack and you end up with Mixon and DPJ, which ended up going off. So not being results oriented, saying if you liked that secondary stack, think about it the other way and try and flip it and go different.
Yep. Yeah. I agree with you a ton. Big T's in the chat making fun of people for spelling as bad as JSU. You know, Big T, you always got to be hurtful to JSU. Yeah. You know what? I suck at spelling. I'm not a good writer. All right. You didn't hire me because I'm a good writer. And by the way, I don't know if you read my write-up, but it was actually really good because the girlfriend actually edited the whole thing. She did it all. So it was actually perfect. It was perfect. Everything was spelled correctly. Everything, the grammar was great. I mean, it was just on point.
It only took her 3 hours to edit the work, but
no,
she finally
Jake Alec,
it
you
out.
want to hear the funniest part? Is I know we got to get to this lineup. The funniest part she said to me was, God, will you just stop writing it? Like, let me just you talk it to me and I will type it. It would just be so much easier that way. And then I can fix everything as we're
You
going.
need a voice to text and then just use the
Yes.
spell check and you're done. It simplify your life.
Yeah, that would
You also
simplify.
need to stop calling her your girlfriend and start calling her your fiance.
I hate that name. I hate that word, fiance. You know what's funny? Also, she hates it. So I'm not the only one. She hates fiance. I hate it. And she doesn't like it when I call her that. That's actually a fact. All right, let's talk about this. We got the next guy up. I think it's our guy in chat. I think it's Sean T's lineup. Let me Sean T's lineup in the Discord. I see him. He's watching the show. He said next lineup up. We got Lamar Jackson paired with Marquise Brown, Mark Andrews. So he's got the Lamar double stack. Cool. Justin Jefferson was his bring back in that game. Like Justin Jefferson as a bring back. I know our guy Big T loved Justin Jefferson too. Then he played 3 running backs: Nick Chubb, Zach Moss, Devontae Booker. And then he played another Buffalo guy with Zach Moss. He played Gabe Davis, who was unowned, and he paired it with and he had the Chiefs defense. Okay, so I can tell that this seems like a Big T core type lineup. He had a lot of Big T's guys in here. Mr. Zach Moss, obviously, who got hurt, so it's kind of tough there. But the Gabe Davis play, like the stack, Lamar, Justin Jefferson, Marquise Brown, Mark Andrews, totally fine with that. Love that, actually. Devontae Booker, I was on board with. He didn't pair anyone with Devontae, but that's fine. Chiefs defense was an obvious. I know Tambo said, no way I'm playing the chalk defense, but 2,300 cheap defense. Okay, I get that. The 2 Buffalo guys, I thought the 2 Buffalo route was an interesting route, meaning without playing Josh Allen, playing like a Zach Moss with a wide receiver from Buffalo, I actually like doing. I did it on a few of my teams. I did not do it with Gabe Davis. I did it with Manny Sanders more and Zach Moss, but I did like that idea. I didn't love the Gabe Davis, but again, 3,500. I just didn't get it with Cole Beasley in, but maybe he thought Cole Beasley was a little nicked up. Whatever.
You're sugarcoating it a little bit. And I love Sean T. Him and I have had lots of conversations. Okay. I think you're being a little too nice for Sean T. You're trying to be nice to the show.
Well, I do like his dog also. I will say his dog I love it.
Gabe Davis was a bad play. And doesn't make a lot of sense when you look at the big picture.
But I said it doesn't make sense. That's what I said.
I know, but you were trying to sugarcoat it in other ways, and I'm just going to be very clear with Sean T and just say it was a bad play. And here's the reasons why. Number one is how many passes has Gabe Davis caught this entire year? If you want to guess, the answer is lower than 1.5 catches per game. He has currently caught 10 catches this season.
I was going to say 9, but
he's at 10 catches in the year, 8 games. Okay. Just looking at the stats real quick. The other thing is he's the 5th wide receiver on this team. You can try to say he's the 4th. You can try to say that he has a role in this team, maybe, but like I just don't see what that role is. And I know that Justin Jefferson is a nice play. If it were me and you wanted to focus in on trying to get the stack of that game, go to Adam Thielen at 6.9K, find $600 and go up from Gabe Davis. It is that simple. Gabe Davis is not a play currently. I think that there were plenty of plays in that area that were better plays in general. But if you didn't see anything, you could have easily just moved down from Justin Jefferson down to Adam Thielen, $600 more. That gives you another $600 to go to plenty of other plays. Gabe Davis was not the guy. That's all I'm saying is you would have never right now with the role he's playing. Gabe Davis is not that guy.
I think the key to unlock this lineup to make it better is not play the chalk D that's 30%, because he said last piece in for Gabriel Davis. But if you just go to a $2,800 D or a $3K D, it forces you to make a decision. Do you go from What's his name? Jefferson down to Thielen? Do you go from Marquise Brown down to Bateman? It allows you to switch the lineup around and just get a better all-around correlated build. We had this a couple weeks ago where someone did Connor, Rondale Moore, and then didn't close it out like with the Arizona D where you could have tried for the triple dip or something. I know it was the last person in. You could call it whatever you wanted. You could say it was a Buffalo blowout stack. Zach Moss does all the work. They are just going to pound this Jacksonville team, and then I'll plug him in because maybe he gets one late, like kind of how Malik Turner got 2 touchdowns at the end of the game with Dak yesterday. You can put a story to it. But to K. Fallick's point, I don't like that book. I got some books on my shelf I barely read. I wouldn't have that book on my shelf. I don't like that story that the lineup tells. I would have forced in something different. That's where I'm saying check your 2v2s, check your 3v3s. Jefferson's better. I like him. I liked him more. But could Thielen get there over him? Yes. Then you're comparing between 1 and 2 or 1A and 1B. Marquise Brown, we want him, but could it have been Bateman? Yes. So I'm just making stuff up. It would not results construction. Same as we're always talking about. It would have done worse the way I'm describing it. I'm just giving you an example of how to look at it so that the build's better for the future to maybe give yourself some more upside to the top and less risk of ruin.
Well, let me add real quick.
Hold on 1 second, K-Falk. So this is where, again, not from a result standpoint, because Justin Jefferson scored, him and Dalvin Cook scored the most points, obviously, for Minnesota. But in this lineup, if I was landing here, right, and I'm like, shit, I got to find a $3,500 wide receiver. I don't like any $3,500 or cheaper wide receivers. Quick switch. Take Mark Andrews out, put Tyler Conklin in. Take Justin Jefferson out, put Bateman in with Marquise Brown, and boom, now you go from having to choose between a $3,500 or cheaper wide receiver that you did not like that area, and now you have like 6, 7 or 7K, whatever you have left, 5K, 5,500, and you can pick a wide receiver between Hunter Renfrow and T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd and Cooper and any of those guys in that. Emmanuel Sanders, if you wanted the Buffalo thing, you could have had that range to pick from. So that is a quick way to go from, okay, I hate this last spot because I always talk about it. I don't like hating a guy on my team. This is just me personally, I rebuild when I get to that. I don't know about you guys. Some people will just say, you know what? I'm shoving it in. I like the rest of my build. I almost never do that.
We just talked about it. I just said, if you don't like Boyd, go look at something in the last lineup. I said, if you don't like Boyd and you wanted the Higgins play, you have to go find it. Don't just settle and say, this is it. Now, he said he had very little time. He was sweating his MME stuff. So I get it. I'm just saying when we're reviewing it, we're going to review it honestly. And that's to JSU's point, to what K. Fallick said. I would have looked at those other options. You mentioned the Conklin one. I think that's great. He mentioned the Adam Thielen one to just free up a little bit more and get to a 4K. And then maybe that meant getting to Bateman, and then you change Brown to someone else at 61. You can find ways to play with it.
There's lots of routes to go. And Sean, I know you're in the chat often as well in the morning. 2 of the names that were talked about a lot on Sunday morning actually were Ayuk and Rondale Moore. Those were 2 names that were being talked about in the chat a lot. And if it's a last piece play, it doesn't need to correlate in any way. And there's an opportunity to really build around those 2 pieces as well as being the difference. And listen, it wouldn't have worked because Thielen didn't get there. Rondale Moore didn't get there either. Ayuk got there. But when I know that you love the thoughts in chat, I know that you love being in the chat and talking through the chat. And I think that it would have if you would have sent that to somebody and say, hey, I have a Baltimore stack. I'm looking for my Minnesota run back and I'm looking for my last piece. And this is what I have right now is Jefferson and Jefferson and Davis. Would you recommend going a different route? I'm pretty sure people would have said, just go to Thielen and find your money and go elsewhere if that was your issue with it. I'm not saying.
Or last minute, he could have went to JSU's Zay Jones play in a spot where there was targets freed up. I didn't think it was going to happen personally, but I get where he was coming from. But there was $500, and then you could have moved up off the $2,300 D, or you just left them. There was other options to go. You would have found $500 more because he was 3K stone min and would have been a secondary stack with your Booker play. So just even if it's last minute, that was sort of a last minute thing JSU was talking about on the show up to lock. I was in there watching it and answering questions in the Discord. I thought that was a great point, and that would have been a way to do it differently as well. Or to K Falik's point, just drop Jefferson to Thielen and get the money up to Ayuk or another guy at 4K. So you would have had that money right there.
Yeah, it was interesting. He actually played even more than I thought he was going to play on the field. It obviously results-wise didn't happen, but he had some opportunity. At the end they took the deep shot to him. Actually, I think Carr should have thrown it a little deeper and let him run a little more. He might have actually had a shot at it, but it got picked off. But yeah, I mean, that's where you could have used some of that. And again, it wouldn't have mattered, I guess, in ways, but we're just finding ways to kind of do it and help you out for next time. So hopefully that helped. It's good discussion for people. We get though, sometimes you're crunching stuff and, you're sweating, doing other things. So you leave a lineup to the side. And I get it. It happens. It's one of the reasons why I don't even try an MME that much, because it just takes away from my actual process. I think it hurts when I have to do both. I think it hurts me personally, not saying you can't do it. Just that's how I feel.
Just on that real quick, because I do both. So just so people get an idea, there's definitely an MME process with an optimizer and rules and settings and things I'm setting up on Saturday morning to be ready for all the changes and then updating and going across. And I also try and make my 3 to 5 max bigger stuff by Saturday evening, leaving that, knowing that in my time after the Off the Chalk show, that's the first place I go with any news that has happened. Then I get to my MME stuff, because that's my biggest money that I'm putting in. I still want my 150 to be proper, so I go to that next. But again, my rules were set up a day in advance, so there's very few rules to change or changes to make. I'm just updating projections and then spitting them back out and running them. So keep that in mind if you are trying to do both.
Yeah, for sure. All right. We got through the two, lineups we had. Made it almost an hour and a half. I think we did a good job, boys. I think we talked about this slate pretty good. Anything else? Final thoughts before we jump on out of here? K Falik, final thoughts?
I got none. I'm just looking at all this news that is flashing up on my timeline right now, and it's busy right now in NFL and NBA world right now. I'm looking forward to jumping into next week. I always enjoy this show. It gives me a nice little way to close out the week and look into the next week. So
yeah, for sure. I love this show personally. It's
can't
probably
wait to talk about Joel and
favorite show I do. I love the
hours.
review. Yeah, I know. I can't wait to talk with you again, Tambo. I don't get to see you again today. I get to see K Falik though twice on Mondays. So that's always good.
Lucky.
Tambo.
Mondays are always a good day for Johnny Fiance.
Yeah, that's right. And we get football. Tambo's going to have his player pool up. Just so if people don't know, Tambo has his own style of page up on the site specifically. So it's right under where Big T's player pool is. It's right under that. You'll see Tambo's attack plan. Stack attack.
Attack plan. You said it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And
I still got the Dak stack attack in my mind, even though it was never a real thing.
Yeah. Well, make sure you check that out, because it's new. It's fresh on the site. Like the last 2 showdowns, I think it's up, and it's been great. Great addition to the site. If you haven't checked it out already, make sure you check it out for tonight. We got a nice Monday night. Well, not a great game, but hey, we got a Monday night showdown slate with a ton of prizes up on DraftKings.
Every time you say that, it's like a 50 total. I'm heading to bet the over now. You just said it's not a great game, but that's what ends up happening. Then it goes off.
One thing too, I got to remember this. Whenever Mike Vrabel plays in big games against good teams, he almost always seems to, like, his team gets up for them. Like when they play in primetime spots, I don't know what it is, but it just always seems to me that they play better when their backs are against the wall or they're against good teams. Like
not sure if we have a hard cutoff, but I know that K Falik is probably pissed right now because he called it on the show. I think it was last week, this show with all 3 of us, and he said it's going to be one of these games that pop up. And I know you said, I remember the words, and I was with you. We said not next week against Indy, but it'll happen, or against the Rams, sorry, but it'll happen. And sure enough, it was in a primetime spot that we could have taken advantage. And I'd said, this is why I remember, I said, I want it in Showdown. I want to take advantage of it in Showdown. And did I take advantage of that? Absolutely not. I went the complete other way.
Yeah.
Two sets. It was in the attack plan last night. I said, I'm going 4-2-5-1, Rams pound, or the other way, they keep it close, but it still goes over. It was not close at all.
So giving Chris Collinsworth any time of day really frustrates me, but Chris Collinsworth had 2 takes. One of them was the worst take I've ever heard. One of them was a really good take. Bad take was that Adrian Peterson is a good person. He's a good human being. Like, that's what he said. He's like, he deserves this. And I was like, that's the worst take in the world. And then you have Chris Collinsworth saying that Mike Vrabel is probably the last coach that really feels like Bill Belichick-ish, where he focuses in on every single play and values every single play. That was the good take. I feel like Vrabel focuses in on every single thing that Bill Belichick, he's like the most Bill Belichick coach there is, and he's probably the last one left in the NFL right now. So, like, it's very – Chris Collinsworth had 2 terrible take, or 1 bad take and 1 good take. So it was impressive. Listen,
we lost our spot, Falik. That's all I'm telling you. We had our shot to crush.
Yeah,
and we did not take
we
it.
all fucked it
and
up.
I think it was a
But
defense and captain, wasn't it?
You'd have to play the freaking Titans, though. Like, you'd have to play the Titans defense, and I don't think
that's JSU's specialty, defense and captain.
I've been playing it two slates in a row, and it hasn't worked. But man, it was. I don't think I could have played the Titans defense even if you asked me to in that game. Like, they were 4% owned. Don't get me wrong; they were 4% owned and 0.17% in the captain spot.
I could have played 300 lineups. I don't think I would have got to a Titans defense. Like,
we'll leave it at that, K-Falik. JSU's the one that lost out on 300 grand here, not us. He does play defense as a captain, and he could have got there. It was a potential. I
will say, though, Big T sent me a screenshot from someone, I think it was someone from RPS, who took it down, took the 300, had a monster night in Showdown, and he had the craziest lineup. He shipped the big, whatever the big 15 or 20, whatever the prize pool was last night.
20 last night. Yeah, 25.
Whatever it was, he shipped it. And man, he had the wildest line. Did you see the winner? Did you guys see like the winning lineup?
Yeah.
I'm pulling it up now. I literally had to go to bed at the point of just ridiculous.
when I saw the lineup, I almost vomited. So if that was him,
it was a solo shipper.
Oh no, this is what's funny. The guy's name was Big T. YC, Big Ty C. And it was Cooper Kupp in the captain, Stafford, Woods, Sony Michel, and then the other side was Titans D and Swain. So
does that not make you sick?
It was the Swain, Michel, Titans D with Cooper Kupp in the captain. Wow.
Yeah, the unique part of it was Titans D versus Stafford versus a Kupp captain. Not a lot of people will play defense against the quarterback or the captain, but it's, that's fine. I don't think I was ever getting to this. And then right behind it, I think, was where you started to see some Titans D lineups and stuff. So
Jeff Swain being your 4th highest paid price guy kind of makes me sick thinking about.
Backup tight ends in Showdown has literally been every single slate. So get ready for, what is it? Jimmy Graham's $200.
Jimmy Graham and Jesse James. So one of those guys is going off. So good luck. Good luck to everyone tonight. Make sure you check out Tambo's stuff on the site, Big T stuff on the NFL Showdown side of the site. Make sure you guys go over there, check it all out. I'll be on tonight with K-Falik and DC talking some NBA winners up to lock, so check that out as well. We're going to get out of here, though. For me, JSU, Tyler, Kevin, nice seeing you guys. Good luck to everyone in your contest tonight. We are out.